lot of customization to the sound. Your AirPods.
Hi, am I audible? Hi, am I audible? Yes. Okay. Yeah, let me just start my screen share. Yes. Just give me a sec. Uh, yeah, I hope the screen is visible. Yes. Yeah. So let's just start today's session. Yeah, thank you for joining. Uh, so let's just go over week seven's assignment questions. Okay, the first question: the diversity that exists among different geographies is so just uh, alpha diversity, beta diversity, gamma diversity, and delta diversity. So, so when you are looking at multiple geographies together, it is gamma diversity. So alpha diversity talks about diversity at a local level, but when you're looking at a much larger geography, it's gamma. When you're trying to look at the difference in diversity across two different levels or two different areas, it's called beta diversity. So here it is gamma diversity. So in different types of weathering, stresses can lead to what type of weathering? So it's a physical weathering. Basically, thermal stress is basically heating and cooling, where is it changes in temperatures. So it can lead to contraction, expansion of rocks, and then the associated processes. So it is a form of physical weathering. And vertical arrangement of soil horizons is called. It's soil profile. So basically, you try to understand what all different layers are there, and then how they are organized, and then what all different components are there. And if you remember, we were discussing about climax in ecological succession. So there are different types of climaxes that are caused, right? What is a climax that is caused by wildfires? So what do we call those type of climax? So we use it. We refer those type of climax as catastrophic because wildfires do act as a catastrophic event. So they can be categorized as catastrophic. If the climate is responsible, then it is climatic climax. If it is soil edaphic factors, then it is edaphic. This climax is basically where the humans interfere, and then the climatic community is as a result of human interference, then we refer to as disclimax. And khadar is a type of black cotton soil, alluvial soil, saline soil, red and yellow soil. It's a type of alluvial soil. And the term laterite soil is derived from the Latin word which means brick. So which of these has the highest organic matter content? So which of these soil types? So it has to be peaty soil, because you know because peat has lot of undecomposed organic matter that has been stuck around in it. So that's why it has one of the highest amount. While in other type of soils, the matter is kind of recycled much more faster than it is in peaty soil. That's why it retains most of the organic matter. So yeah, group of actually or potentially interbreeding natural populations which are reproductively isolated from other such groups is a definition of species, right? While ecosystems and biomes are at a higher level of classification. So which of these is not a characteristic of pioneer species when you're looking at uh, you know ecological succession? The first set of species are called pioneer species, and which is not a character. So ability to grow on bare rocks, ability to tolerate extreme temperature, large size, short lifespan. So most of the times these pioneer species actually start on bare rocks, so that can't be. Ability to tolerate, so they have to endure harsh conditions, and they generally have shorter lifespan, and they are very tiny. So yeah, they can't be large sized species. And then which of these depicts correctly the lithosphere primary succession, the primary succession that happens on the earth or the rocks? So it is first rocks, followed by crustose lichen, foliose lichen, mosses, herbs, shrubs, woodland, and the climax community. So yeah, that's all for the week 7 uh, questions, assignments. Uh, if you have anything regarding this, I would be happy to address, or else we can slightly move ahead and yeah, start our session. Okay, cool. So we'll go ahead. So yeah, so we as this module primarily deals about biodiversity conservation and all. So like just before we go on different ways we conserve species, let's just look at why are we in a in a state where we are worried about species, right? Much of this, there are multiple reasons. Like one of the major thing, there are multiple threats that we have found out, and most of these are a major result of us, right? We are responsible for most of these threats to lot of species, be it mammals, be it plants, be it insects, be it microbes, right? One of the major threats is habitat modification. So we modify the habitat into whatever way we think is good for us, right? For instance, if you think uh, agricultural areas, right? These agricultural areas, they could have been forests, they could have been grasslands, they could have been other sort of natural habitats, or they could have been wetlands, right? But because of growing demand for food, or to feed this increasing population, we have kind of modified these areas into agriculture, so that we can feed ourselves, we can have food to sustain our populations, right? Because there is a cause of morality, right? We can't when it comes to humans versus other species, yeah, humans tend to get the upper hand always. So habitat modification is one such thing. So we modify the habitat from what it was earlier to a different state. Like you cut down the forest, you turn it into an agriculture area. You just, for instance, you're growing paddy, right? A forest which has multiple complex layer structures with tall, very, if you think of a tropical forest, it can go very tall, right? It has the understory, it has a mid story, it has a canopy, upper canopy and all. So there are a lot of species associated with those habitats, but you're cutting all of them down and then convert it into flooded paddy fields, which hardly rise, the height of which rise to 3 meters, or sorry, 3 to 4 feet max, right? But if you look at the same thing in forests, in a tropical forest, it can go go to more than 30 meters, much more than 30 meters, the average height of the vegetation. So yeah, you're actually changing how it looks like. And most of the time, at least this is not the case in India, at least, uh, but the way this modification happens, it's just a huge continuous stretch of single land use type, right? If you have agriculture, it's just paddy fields, like for hundreds of kilometers. But it's not the case in all of this area. So but if you have this single habitat for huge stretches, that kind of uh, you know is not an option, where a lot of species can sustain themselves in. Smaller patches, they can try to adapt and sustain, but for larger patches they might not. So habitat modification actually is one of those drivers for species loss or extinctions. And then one of those major modification is into agricultural lands. And then major area that is modified is the tropical forests. So they are cut down, converted into agricultural lands. If you remember, it has been in the news, right? If not this year, at least in the past couple of years, that most of the uh, Brazilian forests, rainforests that have been cut down is converted into agriculture fields, so that cattle can be raised on those farms, and then that beef can be exported to major uh, major countries like US, which is one of the top consumers of beef or animal based products. So yeah, so that is habitat modification. So it leads to loss of lot of species. And the other thing is invasive species. So we are modifying the habitats so much, and then we are in an increasing world where one where transportation has brought places together, such that you can just go from one area to another in such a short span of time. So other species are also taking advantage of it, not only human. And then some of them are aided by humans, and then some of them, they just do it by themselves. And yeah, invasive species are one such group of species. And there are a lot of invasive species that we have already discussed. We'll just go around, and then one of those prominent species is lantana camera. We just call it lantana also most of the time. So it's a shrub that has been brought into India due to its for horticultural reasons, for gardens and all. But later on escaped into the wild because the area it comes, the temperature, so Indian climate actually matches with the area it has originated from. So it spread, it spread like anything. So most of the Indian forests, if you go, you are bound to encounter this species. And then a lot of species are actually outcompeted by this species. So it out competes for space, it competes for pollinators, it competes for resources. And all those species are losing up a battle against this species, because there is no predator that is actually predator or any other organism that is actually controlling the species apart from humans. So it just blasting its numbers like anything. But the native species, they are being outcompeted, and then they had to, save themselves from the native predators. So yeah, they are losing. And then we have a lot of other invasive species as well, like the African catfish, which has been introduced for its, because it can feed on anything, it can go quickly, has escaped the ponds and then went out into the rivers and spread across. And there are a lot of other species also, and there are invasive species that are released unintentionally, like Parthidium, which is also known as Congress grass, because during the time of famine, when crops were imported from abroad, so this came along with those crops, uh, and then it established itself here. So yeah, they are also a huge problem for a lot of species. Not only species, they can actually balance the ecosystems as well. They have a lot of effects across trophic levels. And yeah, so just the thing, so we can categorize the species into native versus non-native. And then native species can be widespread. There can be like, for instance, if you talk about a parakeet, the rose-ring parakeet, it's a widespread species. But if you talk about uh, there is a parrot, vernal hanging parrot. It's mostly endemic to the Western Ghats region or very few pockets of India. So both are native to the subcontinent, right? And there is a set category that is non-native. That means that this is not from this region. And one of them, they just are like exotics, so they don't do much damage. While the invasive category, they have spread up, and then they are wreaking havoc across most of these ecosystems. So there is a lot of nuances about what species can be invasive, what versus what cannot. We'll just not go into that at, at the moment. But yeah, so they cause huge damages. And because of a lot of these things, habitat modifications, most of these habitats are getting smaller and smaller, right? And there is a lot of uh, contact, so a lot of wildlife and then human associated species get in contact with wildlife, and then vice versa, so wildlife also get comes in more contact with humans. So this leads to transmission of diseases from one host to another or across species. COVID-19 is has been said as one such example. If they have, if because a lot of these coronaviruses have been known to be harbored in uh, bats, so they for we for knew from the concept that it can be a spillover, or yeah, if you believe in other theories, it can be a lab made also. But for the time being, we consider it as a spillover. So this is happening because there's a lot of contact that is happening between wild species in the wild, and then humans or human associated species. And one such diseases that have really affected the wildlife, one of the iconic species in India is canine distemper, right? You might have heard of it. So this is a disease that is more prone to dogs, so it attacks uh, dogs, and then it has a higher chance of mortality. And it has affected, it has spilled over into lions in the Gir. And then since Gir is the only area uh, for lions in India, the Asiatic lions, and then due to a lot of geopolitical reasons, there is no second home for Gir as of Asiatic lions in India as of now. But let's hope they get another one. So what is happening is this species, this there is a high chance that it has spilled over from dogs to these lions, and a lot of lions were found to be positive, uh, found to be having being transmitted with the virus, and then some of them have died also. So yeah, so there is a transmission of diseases that also happen across species. And then if you talk about cattle, similarly, when a lot of these cattle actually go to graze in the forests or fringe buffer areas, so there is a chance of transmission of the diseases that these cattle have, like ringworm or foot and mouth disease, which are deadly for cattle. So they can be transferred to ungulates, and then the populations will crash. So yeah, there is this other effect also that is happening. And then this is a thing, that concept that we have all been knowing, poaching. So it's hunting basically, uh, for animals, specific parts of animals especially, uh, with the belief that uh, either to consume or to for decoration purposes or any other purpose, or for medicinal, hypothetical medicinal values. For instance, these pangolins, you know uh, they are such a rare species. They are caught. So when they are threatened, their usual defense is they curl up into a ball, and then the people can easily catch it up, take it up, go boil it, get off the scales or pluck off the scales when it's alive, depending on how the person wants to do, and then sell the scales. And then these scales eventually, most of them end up in mainland China, where they are either eaten as a delicacy, or they are used as in traditional medicine. Similarly, rhino horns, uh, elephant tusks, shark fins, and the number goes on and on. And then even tiger skin, leopard skin. Even we have in India, we have species like uh, tiger, leopard, and then musk deer, sloth bear. So first, musk deer, males have this gland, musk gland, so which is used in they actually kill the animal and then collect that musk gland, and then since it has this unique fragrance, they use it for using it in the perfumes, making manufacturing of perfumes. So and then similarly, bear, so bile, so they collect bear bile and then they use it for other purposes. So and then, so this is the other part of poaching for other products. And then the main reason a lot of species people actually poach is for food, is for wild meat, either going to their financial status, or it's just because it's a tradition that they have been known to do, and they do have no other option to do or no other things to do. So they just end up down the rabbit hole, just going and hunting wildlife. And then similarly, uh, we have cases of over harvesting, right? A lot of countries actually tend to have trophy hunting, which is kind of falls somewhere in between. If you put it in a spectrum, it's a kind of harvesting species from the population, where you are taking out the species from the population, but you actually kind to use that money that you get into conservation of the species or other species associated with that species. Like there is trophy hunting that happens in some African countries, where people can go and hunt lions, and they pay so and so amount of money, and that money, that money can actually you know go into conservation of that habitat or other species as well. Yeah, deer's horns are also used, and sometimes they are just killed for sole decoratory purposes. And then in some countries, this hunting is also regulated. Like in Canada and US, you can hunt species above certain height in certain period of the year, and then it's allowed. But you need to have some license, like you need to pay so much amount, so and so. There are rules and regulations, but in a country like India, I think it might not be feasible, and it's not possible to have regulatory hunting. And then over harvesting, it's the extreme part of harvesting. And then one such examples is this fungus that you can see. So it's also called as Himalayan Viagra, if you have remembered it. So it's nothing but a caterpillar that is infected with a fungus called cordyceps, right? Uh, and then it costs, roughly a cage of it costs more than 20 lakhs. But due to climate change and over harvesting, a lot of people going and actively collecting a lot of these species, uh, you actually get to find them more and more less as the time goes on, because it takes specific environmental conditions and the specific species of caterpillar, specific species of fungus to infect, and actually get that final infected caterpillar. And then there are a lot of other over harvesting. So most of this, at least in the Indian context, most of this over harvesting is related to medicinal plants, because we can't actually kill animals, but we can actually harvest medicinal plants. So for instance, if you have been a user of Patanjali, which actually use a lot of herbs and herbs or medicinal herbs in a lot of their products, or there are a lot of other companies also like Himalaya, they advertise that they use these medicinal herbs and so stuff. Yeah, so since they are doing that on industrial scale, there's a high chance some of them can actually be over harvested, some of those species of plants, because not all species can be actually grown in forms and all. But yeah, every company has its own stuff. So yeah, and then yeah, mostly plants are exploited here in the case of over harvesting in our context. And then yes, overpopulation in humans, we as a species have modified the earth so much that we are lead responsible for a lot of species extinctions. Because for instance, if you have remembered the story of passenger pigeons, uh, so this species used to be super abundant species, and then they used to just casually hunt them down during their migration time, and they hunted them down like crazily at that, and then the species eventually got extinct, because we as a species just wanted to kill them, because they are, you can see there are hundreds, thousands of them. And then not only that, we also the things that we had discussed earlier, the modification of habitats, to feed the growing populations, into agricultural land, or to to so that people can stay, building up villages, building up towns. We need area. So which is the easiest area to get? Cut down the forest. And that's how humans are kind of responsible for a lot of species extinctions or species declines. And yeah, so those are some of the causes before. So we need to protect them, right? So how should we protect them? So there are a lot of ideas that have been kept forward to protect them. So one of those theories that have been actually used to save us, this theory of island biogeography. So so according to this theory, uh, so as the size of the, so there are different ways you can see. So as the size of the island increases, you know uh, number of species will also increase. So if you look at this point, this is the larger island versus this is a smaller island. So there are a lot more species on a larger island compared to a smaller island, because by intuition that it has a larger area. And then the other part of island biogeography also deals with the islands that are closer to the mainland actually have higher species than the islands that are far from the mainland, because species can quickly go to nearby areas than going to far away areas. So there are a lot of other factors that control that. We'll not go into the nuances of it, but just remember that larger area will have lesser extinction, and then also will have larger number of species. Smaller have greater extinctions, and then smaller number of species. And then if you want to look it in other way, yeah, you can look at it like this. So if an island is nearby, it can have frequent migration and the species number can actually increase. While similar, the same thing happens with area. So larger the area, more number of individuals and more number of species can actually come into it. So how does it help in conservation? So it helps us in trying to understand, designing protected areas, especially if you're planning to do ex situ conservation, where you want to make a protected area and then want to say conserve a species in a certain region, then it will be helpful. Just give me a sec. Yeah. So so it helps us in designing the protected areas. So this theory. So there's an interesting way how they tested it. So they used insects as a model to test out whether this actually works or not. So Eo Wilson and Simberloff, they actually in mangroves in Florida Keys in US, they actually fumigated all the smaller mangrove patches, and then they started actually documenting the colonization happening of species, and they found that according to the theory, it actually happens. Smaller islands tend to have smaller number of species, and then farther away islands have smaller number of species. So it actually works. So bring it into conservation. So there is this debate, should we have single large protected area, or should we conserve several smaller patches that are interconnected? So it's also called as sloss debate, single large or several small. Uh, so so there are a lot of pros and pros that have been happening for a longer period of time. So but it eventually boils down uh, to if it should be the species that you're trying to conserve, right? It should be taken into consideration. If it's a mega herbivore like elephant that requires large patches of area, then you have no choice but have a single patch. But if your focus is much more small species, that doesn't require an actual large area. It can do itself well in smaller areas. You design protect areas that whatever the smaller patches you can find, and then try to make sure that they are interconnected to each other. So it also boils down to the species that is being get targeted for conservation. So yeah, that's what I can that's what I think should be done when you're designing. So if you have target species, depending on target species, whatever is feasible, not all the times is feasible to have. Well, if you have larger herbivore, we can get a larger area. So in that case, whatever we have to stick with that. So yeah, so that's where the framework of island biogeography actually comes. But so the idea actually is, if you have a larger area, it can harbor a lot more species. So if you don't have a species in mind, if you just want to protect an area, that's what people tend to think. And then considering that several smaller areas actually have the same set of species all across those areas, but that might not be the case. Let's say there are species A B here, and then there can be species A and D, C and B. So it's not that it's the same set of species that is actually present in all of the smaller patches. So it can be the unique set of species in each of those patches. When you put them all of them together, this type of patches can have higher species richness. So if you are actually looking for protecting more number of species, then this might be a better option. So that's why targeting a species and then designing depending on the species might be a better option rather than actually looking for trying to argue which is better. So yeah, and then since we are saying that we had to conserve a lot of these species, it may not be easy for all of the species. Not all species are common, right? Some species are quite rare to find, and they are just restricted. Like we are discussing about the pangolin, right? It's such a rare species. It So there are a lot of things that are actually responsible for a species being whether rare or common. So one is the geography and itself. So some species are just range restricted, like the endemic species. They are found in certain regions, and then or they require special habitats, right? So if those habitats itself are so less in number, how can you expect the species to be in high numbers? And then other threats can also contribute to rarity of species. Like for instance, heavier poaching pressure can actually reduce the species number and then lead to rarity of species, right? Uh, yeah, and then modification of habitats also. So this desertification is a more or less a natural phenomena, right? Where a region tends to be converted into deserts, more or less and less fertile land, where you have very little precipitation that happens. But due to human associated effect, this process of desertification is actually, sorry, is kind of increasing. The rate at which desertification is happening is actually increasing. So yeah, that's why a lot of go- UN bodies are being formed. A lot of governmental initiatives are being taken to prevent the spread of deserts, because deserts can't sustain much species, and not only species, just human populations itself. uh, so there is this initiative called Great Green Wall Initiative. So you can so there is this organization that is formed called United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. The main goal is to reduce desertification and to prevent further desertification of habitats. So they have set goals for each countries and so and so. So this Great Green Wall initiative is in Africa. The Sahara Desert is there, and since the desert is kind of spreading much, to limit the desertification of this Sahel zone, so all the countries that are across that Sahel zone started planting trees or trying to make a green wall, so that the deserts can not actually expand here. So yeah, this has been an initiative, but a lot of people are not really uh, you know too pro towards this initiative, but some actually do it. And if you want to learn more about them and then the work and the stats, you can just go and check. They have cool bar plots to say how much land has been actually converted, and then how much carbon has been sequestered because of this planting of trees, and then how much jobs it has provided to the local community. All in all, it's doing its job, at least from the figures it seems. So yeah, So that is the Great Green Wall Initiative. And then, yeah, the one of those main reasons why we had desertification is deforestation, right? We are just cutting down trees for a lot of our things. Like earlier we said, for you know, most of this deforestation in tropical regions is for agriculture. So either if you look at in Southeast Asia, it's most of these tropical forests have been converted into oil palm plantations, right? If you have eaten biscuits, cookies or lace, if you just turn over the pack and see, every each and every one of it says, most of it at least 99%, if I'm not wrong, says that palm oil, because they use this palm oil to uh, to either bake or as an ingredient in a lot of those products. So, and most of it is sourced from Southeast Asia because they are one of those largest producers, because they have this uh, large patches of oil palm plantations, uniform. And then even India was is planning to have it. I hope they don't go with that idea, but if the thing if they gets a nod, most of the forests in the northeast India are going to cut up, and then oil palm plantations are going to come up there. It's not like there are no oil palm plantations in India. There are some oil palm plantations in Andhra Pradesh. There's few more in northeast India also, even in some southern states of India also. But the scale isn't huge. It's very small scale plantations. But the government of India has been planning to increase those things to such a high number, so that we are not dependent on other countries for our oil palm uses, because we one of the topmost consumption of oil, uh, vegetable oil, is that one oil palm that we have been doing, and we had to import that. So yeah, deforestation is one of, and then we also use it for uh, wood. Most of our wood is from those from the forests that have been cut out. So just just watch this video. It's just a couple of seconds. It's from NASA. So sorry. So yeah, just watch it again. So this is the progression of deforestation in a specific region in Brazilian rainforest, right? If you look, across years, so this is satellite imagery from 1970. So it just starts as a single line. Let me just use up the pointer. Right, it just starts as a single midline, which is like the main line, and then there are these branchings that are coming across slowly, right? And then it just kind of progresses across years, right? the so the main stem kind of uh, goes much more deeper, and then these sublines kind of actually goes further, and then it has been most of it has been deforested. So this pattern that you are seeing, no, it's called fishbone pattern. So it's like there is this main uh, rib or the main spine, and then there are these roads that cut 90 degrees to each to that spine, and then because this is the main road that these logging companies actually use. So as you go, and then you use that main road as an accessory, and then you cut into one side from the road, and then as you go you cut down trees and go, and then there are also further smaller branches that are formed like this. So essentially it looks something like this. So we have this main road that is going, and then there's you know sub roads that come up, and then these sub roads are further divided into smaller roads, and then they can have further smaller ones to them. So kind of gives like a fishbone architecture. So this is a form of deforestation that has been documented and is happening. So because that's the way people tends to access. So when you first build a road, so as the road ends, you want to explore other things that are nearby, so you make another road, and then that's how it goes on. And then linear infrastructure, because we as our population grows, we need a lot of things. We need connectivity, we need electricity, we need internet and all, right? For electricity we had to cut down a lot of these areas so that we can put transmission lines, right? We need water, and then we need connectivity, we need roads, we need rail, we need, we need to dig up for laying all those ethernet, internet or communication lines, right? So that kind of actually uh, results in, it kind of opens up the forest. So the canopy that has should have been connected like this is just opened up in the center middle because of those infrastructure, whatever things. So and then these most of this infrastructure tends to be in a straight line. We refer to them as linear infrastructure. They can be in any form, but they cause a lot of, loss to habitat and species. And then actually that also results in fragmentation, right? So there is a huge patch, you cut it in between, you made two fragments. So yeah, that's the source of fragmentation. So this is another view of how forest fragments looks like. Here the source of fragmentation is due to logging, but here it is due to linear infrastructure. So there can be another multiple source of fragmentation. Here fragmentation is basically, there's what once used to be a huge patch has been broken down into smaller patches that are no longer connected to each other. And then most of these patches tends to lie in a matrix. So whatever is surrounding here, it's we call them as a matrix. So most of the time the matrix is entirely different. So if you remember or have gone to places in Maharashtra or Karnataka, even in Kerala. So there are these sacred groves, right? Local in Karnataka at least, uh, it's called Devarkadu. It's like in English it's just sacred because these are small forest patches that are left out because they have, they have this sacred deity, and then the religious beliefs associated to it, right? And then all across, all surrounding the forest patch is just agriculture or human habitation. So that is a forest fragment. It's supposed to be connected, but it's no longer because of what is happening. Yeah. So that is so, and then it leads to a lot of lot of effects on species. Like species can't just move across places because most of the times the matrix or the surrounding area or surrounding habitat is not actually good for species to travel. Like, for instance, species like hornbill, if it wants to fly from one place to another, if it just this plain paddy field, plain area where it can't may not actually land, or it just had to fly non-stop. Some species can actually fly those far distance and from one patch to another, but not all species can actually fly across or walk across. If you're looking for, ground dwelling species, those are the species that get affected a lot, right? So they might not be able to, move from here to here. Like if you talk about a species of frog, what used to be a stream is no longer there because of the habitat being fragmented, and then the species can't actually go through this drier region, and then this forest can be wet, and then the forest floor can be wet here, but the matrix is not something that can enable it to move across. So it affects species also, and there are a lot of other effects, population level effects and all. And then you just take an example of this species. It's a species of stork called greater adjutant. If you look, it's a species that you can get to see in India, and most of the population is in the northeastern part of India, especially in Assam. So you get, if you go to Assam, you will get to see this species. But where? Just go to the biggest Assam, dump in Assam. It's the Guwahati dump yard. This is, such a rare species, and then it's a threatened species, and then that's where you get to see dump yard. So yeah, because of habitat modification and all, the species have found a new place. And then when species like these feed on these areas, uh, you get to, get to see a lot of problems with the species, or at least a lot of things that are happening. you know the concept of bioaccumulation, you know it happens where, lot when you feed on waste, because there are a lot of associated chemicals that have been gone into the waste, or due to human influences, uh, those chemicals kind of get accumulated in the body of a species, of individuals. So that these concepts, that refers how these are happening, bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Bioaccumulation happens in a single organism over the span of its life. So it has been feeding in an area continuously across its life, from birth to death. So it just, the chemicals are getting accumulated in the body. So it's called bioaccumulation. And then, as in older individuals, they tend to have higher amount of the chemicals. And then biomagnification, it takes one step further. So it is the accumulation of these chemicals across trophic levels, right? Because uh, the higher trophic level needs to feed in lot more number of individuals of the lower trophic level, so the concentration kind of goes up, and then the apex predators tend to have higher amount of that thing. So just remember this thing. So as the age goes, the concentration level actually increases. So that is bioaccumulation. While biomagnification, as the trophic level goes, the concentration keeps on accumulation. For instance, you have crustaceans, you have fishes, you have seals, and then you have polar bears. As they keep on feeding, the amount increases across trophic levels. Yeah, see the same thing. So most of these chemicals had toxic effects, and one such chemical that we are more familiar about is DDT, right? So DDT, which has been used to control mosquito larvae, especially to control malaria, because mosquitoes are one of those vectors for the disease, actually gets accumulated across generations. Sorry, get magnified across trophic levels, and then when they actually ends up in birds, so it kinds of reduces the shell thickness of the eggs of the birds. So when the mother or the parents actually sit on the eggs to, incubate the eggs, because the shells are far more thicker than they used to be, the eggs kind of break, and then there's a huge drop in species populations that has happened. And then the subsequent ban in DDT kind of slightly negated the effects, but the populations have not bounced back to the previous levels as of now. And most of these effects, if have been seen, especially in the top level species, like, vultures and all. So yeah, because they are the scavengers, so they take highest amounts of concentration into their body. So now we know that, there are a lot of these threats that are to species, that are present to species, and then a lot of species are being affected, and a lot of species have gotten extinct. we need to put up ways to try to reduce those effects on species, try to prioritize species for conservation, and then conserve them. Right, it's not like you can't go and start really, I want to conserve all of the species. It might not be possible. In an idealistic world, it can be, but in our current world it's not possible. So we tend to uh, you know categorize which species needs which level of protection or which priority. And then IUCN categories has been prominently used for a lot of years because the way they have been designed, right? So so let us just go through the categories. So when we have a species, it's either evaluated or not evaluated. So if the species has been evaluated, if there is sufficient data, you will evaluate it. But if there is no sufficient data, you just call the species as data deficient, because either the species has been recently described, or you don't have much information about the species. Most of the species in IUCN category are data deficient species, and some of them are not evaluated. And then the threats level keeps on increasing. So least concern, you don't need to worry about the species that are in this category. Near threatened, yeah, they are there, but they are not really to be worried about. But and then these categories are highly important, like vulnerable. The species is vulnerable to extinction. And then the species that is much more higher in category is endangered, this. And then followed by critically endangered. So these three species are called threatened categories. These three groups are called threatened categories. And then the next is extinct, either regionally extinct or extinct from a local area, or they are just extinct in the wild. So they are just species present in the zoos, so in that are in inside to conservation breeding programs, but there are no species, no individuals left in the wild, or they're just completely extinct, like passenger pigeon, dodo, Tasmanian tiger. So so yeah, these categories keep on updated after subsequent revisions, and then based on the number of individuals, the threats to the species, and all these are assessed. And then the species can be either downgraded or upgraded and all. So the more threatened the species, the more prioritized the species should be for conservation, right? And then the more funding it can draw for conserving the species. Similarly, in India also, we have Wildlife Protection Act. Uh, so in that Wildlife Protection Act, we have schedules. Schedule one has the species. Species are put up into four schedules mostly. So Schedule one has the highest level of protection, right? The same level protection the tiger receives. And then turtles, tortoises are also in Schedule one. And then there is Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4. So all of the species are classified into these four schedules. Yeah. So according to the classification of IUCN, so more than 42,000 species are threatened with extinction, because they are in these threatened categories. This is just still 28% of all species assessed. So of all the species that are assessed, 28% of the species are threatened with extinction. And then most of them are amphibians, and then plants, coniferous plants, and then coral reefs and sharks. So yeah, there is certain groups that are threatened with extinction much more higher than other set of species or other set of group of living organisms. So yeah, so and then I'm not going to discuss much about in situ and ex situ conservation, because we all it has been discussed, and then we all know most of it. So yeah, that's all I have for today. If you guys have any questions or any clarifications, I would be happy to. take them now. Yeah. If not, we can call it a day here, or if you have any questions, I'd be happy to stay here and then answer them. So, okay. So let me just go back to that slide. So it is a kind of little advanced topic, but I'll try to go to it. So this is uh, island biogeography is talks about how species colonization and extinction. So if you know the terms colonization and extinction, colonization is like a species coming into an area and then colonizing that area, and then extinction is the species going out of that area. Basically it just got extinct from that island, right? So it kinds of tries to use those two phenomena to predict the number of species that can be seen on any island. So if the island, so it says according to that island biogeography, the to keep it in much more simpler terms, as the size of the island increases, the number of species that can come onto the island actually increases. Okay, that's one part of the theory. And the other part is, as the closeness of the island increases to the mainland, so the number of species on that island actually increases. So if you take an example of, let's just look at one thing in terms of area. So all these three islands are of the same area, right? So the island that is closest to the mainland, right, has higher number of species compared to the island that is farthest to the mainland, which has the lowest number of species. So that is one part of the by island biogeography theory. The other part is, if all of these islands are at a similar distance from the mainland, but they're different in the size, the area, so island that has the higher amount of area will have higher amount of species, and then the island that is smaller in terms of area will have the smaller number of species. So the thing comes up is why. All it has to do is with the extinction and colonization of species. Okay, if the island is near, there can be more extinctions, sorry, more colonizations that can be seen. So if you look at this upper line, so this is the colonization curve of a nearby island. So the number of species that come onto the island actually is much more higher than an island that is far away, right? So the colonization is higher on nearby islands compared to far away islands from the mainland. Similarly, the other part of the island biogeography, if you remember, is with respect to the size of the island. So the smaller islands tend to have higher extinctions, while larger islands tend to have lesser extinction rates. So these two processes, colonization and extinction together, uh, are responsible for the number of species, right? And then together these two will be kind of determine how many number of species you get to see on how distant the island is and the size of the island. So that is roughly that thing. So basically it talks majorly about the size and the distance of the island and the number of species that can be present. And then the number of species are determined by colonization and extinction rates, right? Yeah. So it will take a time, but just go back if you get time and then try to look over the plot figure, or just google around so that you can, if you are slightly little more confused, you can uh, understand it a little bit, right? Yeah. Yeah, cool. So yes, uh that's all I have. for today. Yeah, if okay, so you want me to go over how what are the criteria for those categories or each of those categories? Okay, then yeah, I'll try to go over the uh, what all how some of these assessments at least is done, and then how species are put up into those categories, right? Like for biodiversity hotspot, what are the criteria? Yeah. Yes. Cool. Then that's all I have for today. Then yeah, that should be the end of the session. Thank you for joining. We can, yeah, thank you. We'll stop the presentation here. Bye.